Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and how are you doing today? I hope things are well and your family and friends are doing well and everyone is safe and happy. Today, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue with my discussion of the works directed by the great and legendary John Carpenter. Today, it is my great pleasure to be able to talk with you a little bit about one of the great films, The Thing. There's been so much said already about the film The Thing that I don't think I will be able to add anything new to the conversation. I will only be able to make comments about this film based on my own personal experience with this as a film fan, as someone who has seen this film ever since I was little. This film came out in 1982. And I was born in 1979, and so this film was something that I wasn't able to see in the theater when it was released because I was way too young. I knew about it by watching it on VHS. Sometimes it was shown on television when I was growing up in the 80s and the like. So that's how I became aware of The Thing. And I think I became aware of The Thing at such a young age that it's one of those films that I feel like I've always known growing up. So this is a film that I have seen, I think, so many times. Now, I wouldn't consider myself a real expert in the details and the nitty-gritty with respect to the various elements that come up in this film, The Thing. And that means that I am not necessarily as well prepared as some others who have really gone and dug very deep with this film, trying to figure out its secrets, its mysteries, in particular trying to formulate reasonable theories, for example, about which characters are basically the thing, and those sorts of theories about this film. And I think there are so many theories that have been generated by this film. Again, I'm not an expert in all of them, but I will try to touch on some of them to the best of my ability later in this video. But suffice to say, I think that regardless of my ability or inability to be able to penetrate the mysteries of this film in terms of the specifics, I think that as a general proposition, I consider this film to be one of the greatest films from the late 20th century in US cinema. And I believe that because it feels like it is a culmination of so many elements, both B-movie genre elements and also A-movie quality elements. I'll try to get into that later in this video, but as a general proposition, I feel like there's a swarm of so many different things that come together to present a film that has a message. It's a film that presents just a traditional haunted house film, in a sense. It is a universal film, so in many respects it is another kind of universal monster movie. It is also a well-acted theater piece. It feels like in many respects, it's almost like a chamber piece in many respects, in terms of its claustrophobia, attitude about its sets and the like. It is also a tale that is, I think, very apropos with respect to paranoia and with respect to this kind of this kind of feeling of suspense and on edge, not knowing who's who. And I think a lot of links can be made to the sort of Cold War paranoia of the time. Remember, this is the early 1980s. And I think on and on. Ultimately, it is a real chiller, entertaining roller coaster ride that has so many surprises. It has, I think, many different ways in which it tries to scare its audience, both in terms of direct jump scares, also in terms of direct body horror type special effects scares, but also integrated into that are these, I think, very psychological, deep-rooted scares that really get under the skin and linger long after the film has ended. So what you're left with these horrific images and also these scenarios that I think are endless. And what makes this film even more powerful and potent is that even now, which is 2019, so we are dealing with many, many, many years after the fact, after this film is made, one can still watch this film and one can still have many different permutations, many different possibilities about what is going on in this, and still not come away with any easy answers. I would dare say that even though that there are many theories about what is going on with the thing, the film and the narrative, what happens with what character, etc., by the end of the film, etc., I would still suggest that as reasonable and as persuasive as many of those theories are, nonetheless, the film still refuses to yield its answers to us with any sort of clarity and precision. And I think that is one of its strengths. And it's one of the reasons why I think this film can last and has such lasting power, to the extent that even now, many, many years after the fact, it still holds up incredibly well. Incredibly well. I would also say that, as a general proposition, this film is a kind of real, it can be said to be a kind of evolution in the filmmaking craft of John Carpenter. There are also many things that are kind of a culmination of a lot of themes and ideas that we have seen in earlier John Carpenter works. But it does feel also at the same time to be something fresh and new, and he is spearheading something with his work. So I think in that respect, it is a very significant, seminal, and very important point in time in the filmography of John Carpenter. And I will also try to get into what I specifically mean by that later on in this video. But I do believe that this is a significant film in John Carpenter's filmography in many respects. That is my general approach to this film, and that is hopefully suggesting that I indeed truly love this work. I admire this work, and I never grow tired of this work. This is one of the greats, and it is certainly not for everyone. There are some really gross bits. There are some really nasty things that can happen here, but it is all for a purpose. It is all for a kind of show that the film is presenting to us, and it is never superfluous. It doesn't feel overdone or overbaked. It feels just right, if you know what I mean. This film knows how to test its boundaries, it knows how to test its audiences, and it knows how to really push the envelope in many respects, both in terms of its visuals and also in terms of its concepts. But it always brings us down to a sort of central focus, which is, I think, the ultimate in its scares and its truly horrifying effect, namely how in the heck do we know about the other? Right? And I think in many respects that is one of the most horrifying concepts in sort of a grand scheme of existential thought and that sort of thing. So in many ways, my friends, and I will hopefully get into more detail in the second part of this discussion, but in many ways this is the creme de la creme of horror cinema. This is one of the great examples of American cinema from the late 20th century. It is certainly one of the greatest examples of American cinema from the 1980s. It is one of the greatest examples of John Carpenter's genius as a filmmaker. It is one of the great examples of ensemble cast and crew. It is one of the great Kurt Russell performances. It is one of the great Universal monster films. It is one of the great films, period, I would dare say. This is John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982.